I'm Jim Collison, and live from our virtual studios around the world, this is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on January 8th, 2021. Called to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you are listening live, we'd love to have you join us in our chat room. There's a link right above me there on the live page. Just log in there and let us know where you're listening from. That's kind of the tradition here. If you're listening after the fact, you can still ask us questions. Send us an email. Many of you have, by the way, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget, if you're on YouTube or of any of the podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify being the big three, subscribe to us there so you never miss an episode. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. We appreciate that as well. Dana Williams is my guest today. She's the author of the new Strengths Journal, which we're super excited about. She's a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach. Her expertise range from strategic marketing advisor, leadership development, living with purpose, and all things travel. That's the kind of thing I'm excited about, Dana. Although we'll have to return to travel, right? We still have some work to do there. Dana's industry experience comes from her 25 years at Southwest Airlines and leadership in areas of operations and brand marketing. In this role, Dana led marketing teams through 2 acquisitions, which we know can be tough, and launched over 30 new destinations and contributed to several iconic branding moments. We know those Southwest branding moments are always good, so thanks for doing that. Her top 5: ideation, strategic, futuristic, maximizer, and individualization. Dana, welcome to Called to Coach.
Well, thank you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Congratulations for being on the first Called to Coach of the new year of 2021. Yeah. Exciting year. We have a whole bunch of these planned for the year, and you get to kick it off. I couldn't think of anybody better to help us for 2021. So thanks for doing that. Sure. Hey, I gave the intro up front. Anything I missed in that? Anything? What did we miss as we think about who you are? Just give us a little bit. If you're going to introduce, I met you in the elevator for the first time. What else would you say?
Yeah, I think I'm passionate about people, and I've been married for a long time. I just had my 42nd wedding anniversary this week.
What?
And I have a daughter.
I thought you were like 30. How can you do that?
I am. Yeah, I got married really young. So ups and downs of marriage. So I have been doing, my husband and I have been working with couples as well, and integrating strengths in there with them. So that's kind of a side thing we've done. But I also have a daughter who's an entrepreneur and a husband who's an entrepreneur. And they have been coming in and great resources for me as I've launched over the last month and a half. So
yeah, you've had a busy couple months.
Yes.
Retiring from Southwest, and then really kind of focusing your energy and efforts on this journal that you've put together. You call it
absolutely
kind of creatively known as the Strengths Journal.
Yeah, very creative name, right?
That's okay. Gallup has a podcast called the Gallup Podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
We've done the exact same thing. Hardbound book just released, available online for folks if they want to go out and do that. What's your website if they want to? That's
it's thestrengthsjournal.com. Make sure you put that in front of.
I already messed that up. There we go. Thestrengthsjournal.com.
Yeah.
Hardbound books that folks can purchase. Let's talk a little bit about, before we get into that, why? Why right off the bat retire and then create a journal?
Right. Well, so this has been, I think you asked me, Jim, how long have you been working on this? Well, my whole life. I didn't know what I was working on, but it came to kind of crystallization about 18 months ago when I realized that I wasn't living intentionally every day. And I realized that strengths was such an amazing tool. As a leader in marketing at Southwest, we were able to use our strengths every day and keep them active every day, and intentionally integrate them into so many different things we were doing. And then we actually launched the coaches group at Southwest Airlines. And from there, I saw the opportunity, or the challenge that I had as a coach and a leader, was that people would learn about their strengths. You'd lead a facilitation, or you'd do a one-on-one coaching session. But then you kind of wondered in your mind, are they going to keep this up? Is this something that, how do I know? I can't be with them there every day as a leader or as a coach. So how are they going to keep this up? And so I realized I've been a planner junkie my whole life. And I've just tried different planners, different daily journals, online planning, all that. And I just didn't see anything out there that really connected in a quick way and a system that would help people live more intentionally every day. So I got myself up early every day and started writing and working on it. And because I was working full time, I kind of had to do pockets of time on the weekends or early morning or late at night. And and then I presented the idea to Gallup Licensing, and that took another 6 months, 7 months just to get through all the, I had to get a licensing attorney, all the things that happen with just creating something. Because I have ideation, I have the idea, and I have futuristic, but it's putting it all together. And so learning patience and also learning to be quick when I need to be quick. So I
Mhm.
was balancing both of those as I was developing this.
Yeah, I think
Um,
some people think they've got an idea, they're gonna get write it in a week, that's gonna be
ugh,
produced, and they're
yeah,
selling it on Monday. And even aside from our licensing process, which takes some time, it just does.
right.
It's just part of the
Just
thing.
yeah.
I think it's kind of good to work your way through this over time anyways. Did you find you learned things during the process that you could reincorporate back in?
Absolutely. It's kind of like planning. Somebody said, like planning a wedding. The longer you have to plan it, the more you keep changing things and adding things. I think it was like that. I actually got a team of people to test what I had written.
Mm,
And so I made more changes. I spent some time with I wanted to self publish and I wanted to publish in United States, and that took time to research. And
mm.
so every time I got a roadblock, I just said, okay. And I'm a woman of faith. So I was like, there's a reason that this isn't moving right now. And I didn't know when I was going to launch it. I just let the process work itself out based on my schedule because I wasn't full time working on this. It was a part time gig of me just trying to figure it out in my free moments every day.
Yeah.
So
Why paper versus going digital?
yeah, I
I
think that's
think
a good question. I think there's something that happens when we get on our computer every morning and start typing, and there'll be social media pop up, other things pop up. There's also something very powerful with our brain when we write. And I think it's the lost art of writing down and using a pen to write down every day, what we do. It was funny in all of my meetings and marketing at Southwest, I would study what everybody had at the conference table. And most of them had hardbound books that they were keeping track, and they were mostly the same size, 6 by 9. They were keeping track and just writing down notes. There was quite a few that had their computers in the room with them, and I like to do that too, keeping notes. But there was something about writing it down and being able to pull it back out and look at it and think back. Even since I wrote my mission, gosh, 3 years ago, I wrote it in a book. I put it on my computer. I put it on my phone. But I still go back and look at that moment of when I came up with what my mission was and what that would look like. And it was all written down. So
when you think about the journey that you wanna take someone through, especially from an area of strengths, and if you were to kinda give the overarching idea, like, what are you really hoping the journey is for someone, and how are you helping them to grow through that journey, and how does this help them?
so it starts. I was on this journey. I had reached, my late 40s and early 50s, and I was like, who am I? And
Mm,
what am I supposed to be doing on this earth? And it wasn't until I discovered StrengthsFinder and discovered my talents and realized if I worked on my talents every day, I could improve them. And so if you had to say one overarching thing is that you can't change your life until you change your daily actions.
mm,
And I realized I was letting other people guide my day. I was letting other things come in my day because I didn't have a mission I was working towards. I was all about, and this is great. So thank you, Jim, for putting that up. But before you even start working in your journal, the first thing, besides putting in your strengths daily, um, you actually have to fill in the front with what are your 5 to 10 most important, your all of your strengths and what you bring and need, and those are all in the resource book in the back. But then the mission statement. What is your mission statement? Have you identified your mission statement? And this is your personal mission statement. And this is so powerful because during the process of daily planning your week, and then you'll have a week summary where you go back and look at what you did, you have to kind of refer to that mission. Am I doing something today towards that mission? On the days that things got really tough for me, when it was seeming like I was having delay after delay, or printing costs were higher than I anticipated, or somebody couldn't help me with what I needed, I had to get that energy to go, and it was my mission statement that kept me going. And then after you get your mission statement, it's really about your core values. So, core values, as we heard Dean Jones talk about it a couple of months ago, or I don't know when that was, in December,
Mhm.
I love that because I think it really crystallized how they are. Strengths is a dimension of your core strength, of your core values. After we came through, as we were going through the pandemic, and looking back, I can say that our core values was our stability at Southwest Airlines. When Gary decided not to do any furloughs and let people know, I don't know when or if we're going to have furloughs, but right now you can guarantee that you will not be furloughed till the end of December.
Wow.
So that was a core value of transparency. That was a core value of trust. That was a core value of compassion. And so if those core values just get you through. Then after you've done your mission and your core values, I'm a futurist, so I like to plan way out. But what I learned is that as somebody that has futuristic, I have to bring my goals in closer, or else I won't be able to achieve them. So I actually have you focus on, what do you want to do in 3 years from now? And then what do you want to do a year from now that leads to that 3-year goal? And then 6 months from now, and then 90 days from now. The book is actually 4 months. And the reason I did 4 months is because when you get going and you're starting your habit, you're right at that 90-day mark. And it's kind of like you need one more 30 days just to kind of get you to that next habit,
Right.
right? And so if I go back to the calling, which is, if you want to change your life, you got to change your daily actions. So you want to dominate your day. And how do you dominate your day? Well, my goodness, thank the Lord we have strengths, right? What a great, when I look at other planners and I look at other ways to manage my day, I'm like, I need to apply my strengths because that's where I'm going to get the energy. So then it becomes, it's not about managing your time, it's about managing your energy.
Mhm.
And if you look at how the day is set up, if you want to go close in on that, like let's look at Monday. It's really, and I use this as I was launching my business, because I had to be very productive from October 1st until we launched December 6th in the launch program. And I used it every day. So here's how it works. Basically, you set an intention every day. You can do it the night before, or you can do it the next morning. And you just say, my daily outcome for today is, and you need to be specific. Why? And then you need to say, why is that your daily goal for today? And it's usually because mine says, because I want to grow my business, or because I want to help touch X amount of people. And I'll have a goal each day. I mean, I'll have an outcome each day. And then we only give you 3 things to focus on to take action. And the reason 3 is, most people I've talked to, and this is me. I had this long list every day. And what do we typically do in a day? We overcommit. And so if you can just pick 3 big things, or 3 things that you want to accomplish by the end of the day, great. And then on the right-hand side, you put which strength you will use. When I was launching my business, I had to go into some of my 6 through 10, because those are my executing talents. And so my thinking talents were all on the left side, which was mostly all about, thinking, futuristic ideation. So I would combine maybe one of my thinking talents with one of my executing talents. And that really helped me cue in for the day, what I needed to focus on, what I needed to turn off, and what I needed to turn on. And I can tell you, I got everything done that I needed to get done, and we launched on time, because I didn't try to do everything and be all things to all people, which we teach in strengths, right, as a certified coaches. But I knew that if there was something I could take action on and I couldn't do it, who else could help me get it done? And I zoned in on those people. And then I also have an area there for lower priority tasks. Those could be going to the cleaners, going to the calling the dentist, dropping off kids, whatever it is that you have. And then at the end of the day, what are you grateful for? As we know, well-being is going to be huge as we get into 2021 and beyond. Mental health is so important. How can we be grateful for all the things that happen, even when we had a really day that didn't turn out the way we set our outcome for? What can we be grateful for? In marriage ministry, we talk a lot about expectations, and I talk about this at work with people I'm coaching. And sometimes when we have expectations, it causes frustrations. But what if your gratefulness is bigger than your expectations, right? And that's what this is about. What is one thing I'm grateful? Find that silver lining. If there's a silver lining, that means we went through a tough time. So there's always a silver lining, right? What was that you're grateful for that day? And then my favorite thing I've grown to come and love about this is at the end of the day, what I learned today or what fear I conquered. And this was a big thing we had at work is, conquer one fear a day. And it wasn't until I realized that there are things that I was afraid to do, but I didn't know how to get myself motivated to do them. So writing them down helped me. And then what I realized looking back is I created a new file. All of a sudden I had a new file. I had a fear. I was able to get through that fear. And then I was able to grow. And that's what we want, right? We want to be in that growth zone. We got in the pandemic, we were all about the fear zone. And then we got into the learning zone. We want to be in the growth zone. So if we're growing, that means that we're tackling and conquering fears every day or learning. So what's been fun for me as I've gone through this is writing down what I've learned each day. And they've almost become little statements of things that could turn into social media or turn into another book or I don't know what, but I'd love to hear from people what they're conquering, what fear they're conquering or what they're learning. My learner is number 12, and I had to learn a ton to get through these last 45 days. But I knew I couldn't learn anything, and I knew I couldn't listen to every professional out there that's in the social world or the digital world. I had to mute a lot of things so I could hear what I needed to hear. The other thing, Jim, if you'll skip to the end of the week, we have, which is called the weekly, and go past the weekend. We have a weekend update, and then there we go, weekly review. And this was designed to kind of look back and say, okay, how did my week go? Did I do what I needed to do? Because what gets measured gets done. And so really looking back and thinking, I was energized in my strengths last week when? Well, what strengths were you using? The blind spots with my strengths that I need to navigate. What are some blind spots? So I have ideation. So I had to tell myself, stop the ideating and realize that's becoming a blind spot for you. My next week's goal. So set an intention for the next week. And then I plan to conquer the following fear towards achieving my goal. So, and then right underneath that, I reviewed my long-term and short-term goals. I was listening to a podcast last week from somebody that said, okay, take a day and review your whole last year and think about all the things. And I'm thinking about all the leaders and coaches and business people I know. And I'm thinking, does anybody have a time to do that? Why don't we do it weekly? Why don't we just take a moment and look at what's going on weekly and then adjust and pivot and reset where we need to reset? And so this has been a helpful measurement tool as I've moved forward. And then the last thing on the weekly review is basically these could fit into well-being. It's examining yourself and rate yourself on your friend. How are you doing with your relationships, your friends and family, your finances, your faith, and your fitness? So it's just the way this was designed was to be for that busy person that's navigating, working from home, managing children, managing parents, managing a lot. But how do we keep it simple? But how do we integrate strengths so that there's a simple way to look at ourselves and design it for ourselves instead of design it for the masses?
Yeah, I love that index, just being able to self-evaluate yourself and then be able to come back and say, how am I doing? Because that's the
Yeah.
power of it, right? How am I
Yeah.
doing in these kinds of areas? How is this? When we were prepping for this, one of the things that we've kind of learned through this pandemic is that what changes well-being oftentimes is giving. And
Yeah.
so how am I giving in these areas?
Yeah.
How am I giving it back? I'm going to say the one thing I learned is flipping board and how to navigate it during this interview.
Oh,
It,
good.
no, it's a super great tool. I struggled a little bit, so I'm sorry if I sent anybody, into a seizure as they were trying
No,
to
you did good.
navigate through. But available on your site again. If you go to thestrengthsjournal.com and head over to the Strengths Journal page, you can see these for yourself. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see on the video,
Right.
and so you can get there. Oh, by the way, great job on getting that. It's very, very helpful. A couple questions coming in from the chat room. Let me get to those here really quick because I think they apply. So Richard says, I really struggle with daily habits. My chocolate advent calendar only has half. Now, come on, Richard, it's chocolate. That should have motivated you enough as it is. But it says his chocolate advent calendar only has half the doors open. What motivation do you have to help us use the book every day? What kind of motivations help
Sure.
in doing this every day?
So I think first of all, I'd recommend you get a buddy to do it with. I think that would be fun. I think the other thing is we're going to be sending out weekly boosts of things you can be doing.
Mm,
If you go to my site right now, you can sign up for a PDF how to manage your day and get energy out of your day. And there's little tidbits of things to do in there. So I think it's really if I always say this, and I wrote an article about this. It's in Gallup. It's put the circle around yourself, and everything in the circle you can change, you can control. But outside of the circle, you can't. And I think we spend a lot of our mental energy in creating a narrative that says, I'm so frustrated at so and so, or my husband, or my daughter, or whatever. And we don't put the energy on ourselves. And I think it's a self discipline. And it's that daily, the secret is in the daily agenda. Because
mm.
you have to look back and be responsible for yourself. This is what I said I was going to do. Why didn't I do it? What kept me from doing it? And
Yeah.
then measuring it weekly.
How might you approach it from a theme perspective? If we were to think about, okay, here's my top 5, and I'm thinking about a daily, kind of
Yeah.
daily exercise. As you think through some themes and as a coach, maybe so as an example, a learner might really kind of focus in those areas of what did I learn in that
Yeah.
section, right? Input may focus in areas of how much have I filled in, like
Yeah.
what have I gotten in there? What else would you think as you just think from a coaching perspective of using some of these themes? How could various people apply their own top 5 to help them complete this?
Yeah, and I have individualization, so I'm gonna go first and say, "What is the biggest problem that you're facing every day?" And then I'm gonna say, "Let's talk through your strengths." One of the other things I'm doing for anybody that buys, I don't know if you wanna flip that up, but we have, a subscription program. So you can buy the journal, and if you already have your strengths, it's 33 a month, and then I'm doing a live coaching session. We'll have, a lesson at the beginning, and then we'll have people just ask questions. And I'm gonna keep these groups pretty small, maybe 12, 15 people so that we can have engagement and that we can share and go through challenges. So it's not like you're just buying a journal and you're trying to figure it out. It's like you've got this group here with you all the way through. And then for people, this might be good for some of your clients. If they don't have their strengths code yet, they can buy the strengths code and buy the journal and get the live monthly coaching. And then for those who just don't have anything, an executive or entrepreneur that doesn't have time to do all that, they can get the one-on-one coaching. But most of my coaches are signing up for the basic program, just and people that want accountability. So I recommend either getting that basic program or finding a friend that gets the journal and both of you talk about it on a weekly basis, or get your coach to do it with you.
There had been some conversation in the chat. I believe that was Nate. Let me see if I can find it. He said, well, I'll just paraphrase it because I can't find it. He got an accountability partner to help him on some of these.
Yeah.
So this would be a good buddy up, or do it in groups of 4 and
Yeah.
have some accountability, right? Meet about it on a regular
Absolutely.
basis. By the way, certified coaches, one of the questions I get all the time is, how do I charge for things? And Dana, you've done a nice job of kind of laying this out, right?
Right.
An easy subscription program. I think oftentimes we think of people get stuck on the 1 hour coaching. What do I charge for it? And you've kind of taken a different approach to that from a cost perspective and adding the journal. And anything else you'd add to that?
Yeah, so that was one of my learnings. I would say if you're starting your business or if you are growing your business, I'm sure you guys are listening to all kinds of podcasts and listening to all kinds of people trying to help. And that was hard for me because there were so many different people out there giving so many different pieces of advice. And my biggest challenge was I wanted to come up with a business model that I thought would be valuable to my clients. And so one of the first things I did was I got into a mastermind. I got in several different mastermind groups, and I listened to a lot of the different um, coaches, speakers, and then I would follow them. And then I set up time, one-on-one time with them, and said, "Help me figure this out." And that's one of my lessons learned is ask for help. That wasn't a specialty I have at all. And even when I went to my financial planner, my accountant, they were like, "I don't know." And I was like, "Geez, this is hard." And it was really helpful to get myself to learn and to go into that focus of what do I want. There's three areas you want to focus on when you're building your business, and it's actually a customer service, price, and value. Well, you can't do all three, and this is what I learned. So my focus was on value and customer service.
Mm.
So I've tried to communicate and connect with all the people that are buying the journals, at least make sure they're getting an email, make sure that we're focus on them. If they have a special need, I'm working with some people right now on how to get this shipped internationally. And I'm saying, just be patient with me. We're going to get this figured out for you. I don't want people to have to pay more money for shipping because they're overseas, but let's just figure it out. So I think everything is figure outable. We know that, but sometimes it just takes time. And my maximizer wanted everything to be perfect right away. And I
Mhm.
had to let that go.
Yeah,
Had to let that one go.
you kind of do. No matter how you're wired, at some point
Yeah.
to let that
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Kim asked a good question in the chat room. I want to come back to this here real quick as soon as I can find my mouse. There we go. So she says this is great stuff. One concern as a woman of faith: how do I make this focus more on others and not become too self-centered? And this is the right. This is designed for personal growth and development. But Dana, as you think about how could I
Yeah.
use this and then face it outward, right? The me versus we.
Right.
How do we
Right.
how do we send that out? Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think because what this is about is self-development, right? This is not and I love, is it Kim that's asking this question? So make it we and I think one of the dings I got for myself from my counselor is I was too much people pleasing. I needed to work on me, and then everything around me would change. And so that was one of my learnings. But also, I think one of the things that we can learn from Ben Franklin, I think it was Ben Franklin, he wrote in his journal every morning, who can I serve today? And at the end of the day, what did I do to serve others today? So why couldn't that be one of your outcomes that you put in? And he did that every day.
In that section you have, what did I
Yeah,
learn?
yeah,
What was the other one? What did I learn? Oh, what did I fear? You
yeah. A
could
fear you
also
conquered.
just write in, where did I serve? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You
And
know,
that gratefulness, you're grateful for people that you got to learn from, or grateful for people, grateful the opportunity to serve. Um, yeah. So, and this is great feedback because these are kind of things we want to know that people are the mindset there. So that's a great question.
no dates in the book, right? And so I could
Yeah.
start this anytime. I could
Anytime. And if you have one of those days you just didn't get it done, it's okay. You know, don't beat yourself up. It's like that just didn't happen that day. And I've done that to myself. And I'm like, okay, we're going to go the next day. And the reason for that is number one, I just wanted this to be designed by you for you,
Mhm.
and that you put in here what you need based on what you're doing in your day and filling out your days. And some people have found that going ahead and filling out the week ahead and putting some key things in there throughout the week has been helpful. And I've done that myself too when I have a really very a lot going on. So there's nothing wrong with that either, just to get going.
spend some time, figure it out, figure the system that works out for you, right? I
Yeah.
always in these kinds of systems, I was a Franklin Covey guy. I had done
Yeah.
that for a lot of years. To back to your point about physically writing, we talked about this when we were getting ready for this interview. for us, that physical active writing is super important. I have tried to go digital because I'm a technology nerd.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
every planners are the only thing, and I'm actually super simple. It's just a piece of paper, right? It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
that I plan my days on, scratch paper and some of those kinds of things. But I have tried to make that change to digital. This goes back to the very first question I asked you, why not digital? I've actually tried to make everything I do digital, and it's just a disaster.
Hmm.
Like, I kinda need to write it down. It's just the way who I am. Not that way for everybody. I think some of our millennial friends and those millennials that are coming out where it's
Hmm.
only digital first, I think they're able to make that bridge. And any thoughts to do an electronic version of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I'd love to. That was the other thing too. There was so much I had in my head of what I wanted to do because I do live so far out in the future. So I wanted to get this out and learn from it. The first week that we were out, the first 3 weeks was all about listening and learning, and we'll continue listening and learning and adapting. But yeah, that's definitely in the vision.
Dana, as you think about lessons learned on
Yeah.
through this process, you kind of mentioned, asking for help.
Yes.
How important, I mean, this is risky. Like, you're spending a whole lot of time to create something that you put some money into. We
Yeah.
won't necessarily get too deep into that, but it's a big risk. How did you approach this from a risk mitigation standpoint? How did you push past that fear of like, oh, I don't know if I can do this,
Yeah.
and not just the content, but getting it published, getting it bound, shipping, all those things you have to do. How'd you get past that?
Yeah, I think I had to, right, we train our mind every day what to think by how we are listening to things and and I had to really start muting some things and put some boundaries around things I was listening to. So, including myself, when I found myself saying, "Oh, this isn't going to work because you can't find a printer that's going to print this in the United States at the same price they could print it somewhere else." And I had to really work through those risks. But I think one of the other things that helped me was knowing that I was determined and that I also had that responsibility to myself and that I also had a mission. And so whenever I got a little fearful, of course I would talk it out with my husband or a friend or whatever or coach, but I would also just push myself to make that next step.
Mm.
And it was hard, and that was the hardest thing. So have y'all know Bob Goff? Love Bob Goff. He wrote Love Does, and he speaks a lot, and he always says, "Just call me. I'll talk to you." And he has his phone number at the back of his book. So one of my goals was to call Bob Goff. And he's all about dreaming big and thinking big. And I kept saying to myself, "Oh, he's not going to answer my calls. He won't." And I love this man. He is so energizing. And every time I hear him speak, I just get energized. I was like, okay. So, I mean, literally, it went from page to page to page in my journal because I kept getting scared. So finally, one Sunday, I think it was I'd go on Sunday, I go, "No, I can't call him today because it's family day and he's probably with his family." So then I'd wait till the next day. Finally, I just said, "Today is the day." I called and he answered. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And I thought, I better be really prepared because he said that. He says, "If you're going to call me, be prepared for what you want to ask." He's one of these guys that would rather talk on the phone than get a text or whatever. Because I did send him an email and I didn't hear back. So anyway, I called him and I said, "I'm starting my business. I'm going to be focused on strengths and helping people daily manage their time." And he said, "What do you think?" He was just so encouraging and so uplifting. And I thought, now look at all that time I didn't do that. And so it's just jumping into the fear and just saying you're going to do it. And even if you have to roll it over a couple of days in your in your calendar, you can, and you'll get it done. And if
You
you
just
need somebody, call me and I'll help you cheer you on.
you gotta get
But
sick of writing it, right? You gotta get
yeah,
tired, like,
you
I
write it
gotta
down
finish.
and then you get mad at yourself because you didn't do
I
it.
know. Like, I should have done that earlier. I have a little trick that I've had to learn, and this works for me, is I have to remove the emotion from the action, and I
Good
just
point.
choose.
Yeah.
It's a choice. So I'm like, "Okay, I just gotta do this." I need to just make the call to the doctor, or because I hate doing those things.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of remove the emotion for a second and kind of trick myself into actually doing it. So it's
There
like,
you
okay,
go.
I'm going to do this without emotion. I'm just going to do it, even though I'm hating it right now as I'm dialing. And it's actually more like this as I'm dialing the number now.
Yeah.
And you kind of just push through it. The same thing happens when
Push
I
through.
have emails that I need to send. Sometimes in the community, I have to send difficult communications to people to say, stop doing
Mhm.
this, or you can't do that, or some of those kinds of things. And I'll read it a couple times, and then I just have to click send, like hurry up and just click send. Otherwise,
Yes.
sometimes, right? Some of this work that you did comes on the eve of being prepared, though, right? How
Yeah.
long do you think you've been preparing for something like this? If you were to think back, how long, I think some
Yeah.
people think, well, yeah, let me just ask that question. How long do you think you've been preparing for
It's
this?
my whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I got the idea, a year and a half ago, almost 18 months ago, um, but it was probably all my life experiences and going through some really tough times. Went through some tough times in our marriage, went through some tough times just at work, went through tough times with family. And so you start realizing, wow, if I change me, everything else can change, but I can't change anybody else. And so I think that was a big catalyst that helped me say, what I've learned, I need to help get out to the world. And as a leader, I saw so many people, great leaders, great with people, but just beat themselves up on silly stuff. And as a seasoned leader, as a seasoned person, I'm able to say, it's why are you feeling that now? Because this is what you do, and what can you do to change that? And again, if you want to change your life, you got to change something daily. You're not going to see changes daily. You're going to see it at the end of the year, right? And
Although I think
so,
you can make micro changes during a
yeah,
day that have
yeah,
impact. This is why I think it's important we write some of these things down. It's why I keep lists of things, because I
yeah,
often go back. I actually have the 2020 journal right there. If you have to be watching the video to see this, but I put it there on purpose because I still go back and grab it and
yeah,
look back through. Now, again, my journal is really just lists of things, but it's
sure.
super helpful. I took some notes back in November on some things I was doing that I needed access to, and I just grabbed that, pulled it back, and went, thumb back through to find it. Right, super important to have that somewhere where I could get access to it again.
And that was so important when we were developing this product. I worked with a graphic designer and a guy that works with entrepreneurs that gives his time, and he really helped push me to think through the feeling of it, the experience of opening the box, having it on your nightstand. And then for me, it was like, if I want to pull this out 2 years from now, it'll look nice on my bookshelf, and it'll be there, and I can pull it out and remember, okay, this is what I said to myself then. This is what. And so it's keeping your bookshelf of you growing, changing, and in a nice way. That's not just a paperback or something that's going to be hard to keep in your
Yeah.
satchel or wherever.
You can see from my background, I don't worry about pretty bookshelves, but some do. Some do.
But that's okay.
During my Franklin Covey days, they
Yeah,
made really nice binders, and so
yeah,
I appreciate the fact that this can sit, down the line, maybe changing some colors for folks to right?
absolutely.
Maybe some options for that coming up. You alluded to this, earlier in the conversation, but I want you to dig in a little bit more. How important were the folks that were around you in the
Oh,
development of this? I mean, talk a little bit about who helped you and
yeah.
and how. How was that beneficial to you?
Yeah, so I think first of all, my daughter was incredibly helpful. She's had her own business for I think 3 years now, and she's just typical millennial working from home with kids. And she's the one that put me in touch with the graphic designer and this guy that does digital marketing. It came back kind of more of a digital marketing advisor. So when you work in a company and you work in marketing, you've got all these different resources and people with you all the time. And so I knew what I needed. It was just getting in the proximity of people that would help, that had the expertise that would help me move quicker than I was moving on my own. And people that were like-minded. This particular guy had a love of strengths, and everybody that he hired, he had their strengths. And so we spent the first week that we all worked together, the graphic designer and the advisor, I did their strengths chart. It was interesting because I was the only one with high execution, my 6 through 10. Everybody else was ideas and, I was like, whoa, we're going to have to. So I knew that coming in, and then everybody, I have an intern that's helping. And so she was big at her university on strengths. So first of all, that was a criteria, that they knew and understood strengths and loved strengths, but also that they had something that they knew that I didn't know, so they could help me, because it's a different world in the entrepreneurial world than it is in the corporate world, and all the marketing channels. And there was so much to learn, and still I'm learning every day, how to manage all that.
For folks who didn't see it when I was going through it on site, there are instruction pages up front. So if you want to
Right.
see, if you're going to be giving this to someone,
Yep.
and there's some instructions that come with it. One of the things I'd encourage you to do, and I did this with my 2.0 book 15 years ago when I took StrengthsFinder 2.0 the first time, is to put your top 5. The front page is blank. And so put your top 5 in there, maybe your partner, spouse, family members, whatever. Just write it in there. Go out there, write.
And there's actually a place to put it in, Jim.
Good.
On page 4 is where you can put your top 5 or 10 and
Yep.
what you bring and what you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good.
I just found, yeah, and that looks
Yeah.
something in the lighting. That
Yeah.
looks something like this. I just found, and I appreciate it. It's, and a lot of books are this way, but I've always appreciated, I don't have to go find it.
Yes, it's right there.
Mine is on my 2.0 book. Mine is here. Sarah's is here.
Oh, I love
I
that.
know exactly where they are. And before the days of a family spreadsheet, now my daughter organized a family spreadsheet that's
Oh,
on
wow.
a Google spreadsheet that everybody's,
Wow.
by the way, is mandated. She mandated. I didn't have to do it. She mandated the
Wow.
family top 5, and there she wanted to know.
That's great.
But I think a great opportunity to put those, kind of put
Sure.
those people. Any from an advocate standpoint, any other, you mentioned your daughter, anybody else in there that you'd mentioned that was helpful?
So, my leader at Southwest Airlines was
Mm.
incredibly, just so supportive. We had several different conversations, several lunches, just being there for me. And I think this is in one of the Gallup Strength, maybe books. But really, first thing I did 2 or 3 years ago when I was visioning all this was figure out my board of directors and who's going to be at that table that's going to be serving. So my mentor was there, my financial planner, my coach, my daughter, the people that had already gone through experiences that were different from mine that could be advising. One of my friends that runs the ad agency, she was incredibly helpful. Just another gal that runs a business, I called her several times. So that goes in that bucket of lessons learned.
Yeah.
Reach out to those people, get yourself in the proximity of those people, and don't be afraid to call them.
Creating a book is one thing. Creating a website to sell a book is
Oh
another.
gosh.
Without crying, can you spend a little time, lessons learned? Let's just, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
coaches struggle in this area, and maybe as we think about even the way you're uniquely designed, and you
Yeah.
brought that to this, because it's websites can be easy, but most of the time they're just difficult. Talk a little bit about.
Yeah,
That's,
I think it's funny because I think, we have that mindset of, oh, I'm starting a business. I got to get a website. But there's so much more before that, right? It's figuring out, what is my business model? What is my brand? What do I stand for? What are my brand colors? What is my messaging? Um, and then putting that messaging into a wireframe, which is a simple way to give that to a web designer. You've already, I had learned all that. How do I message, and what's my message? Who am I focused on? Who are my core clients, and how do I make sure all my messaging is focused on them? And then, that took the most time doing all of that. And then it wasn't until and then we had to create a landing page that kind of was just up while we were waiting for the website to be developed. But I learned a lot again from my daughter about, she does Shopify, and she does, and I'm doing WooCommerce. So we were sharing what works with both and why they're different. And I've never heard the word plug-in until I started working on a website. And boy, that was interesting, and learning about how all the pages have to be clear and simple.
Mhm.
But I guess the biggest learning there in the messaging is it's not about me. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make when they're branding themselves or marketing. They want to talk about themselves. And really, our customer is our hero. And we're just the guide along for the ride, being there alongside them. So I think if I had to say a fear for me that I had to get over was doing videos and doing things about, because I was like, I don't want it to be about me. But that, and so the messaging and developing the messaging for the core audiences, that took a lot of time, and working with people, to hone that. Again, I had to turn my maximizer off sometimes because it got in the way. Um, but I think the most overwhelming thing when you think of just the website was all the plugins that you need and how they all work and what is the experience and what do customers feel? Because remember, I'm focused on value and customer service. So, wow, knowing that is hard.
Now, I'll open this up for questions from the chat room if this would be a good
Yeah,
time to throw those in there. How important was your Southwest experience? Because Southwest focuses so much on the customer experience.
yeah.
Anything you bring from that time that you incorporate right in as we think about customer experience?
Yeah. So, I was raised at Southwest, worked with her, worked with Colleen, worked with a lot of the founders. So when I first came to Southwest, the company was only 10 years old, and Southwest is going to celebrate its 50th anniversary this year. So I was off and on with the company. I did other things in between. I would leave and go do something else, get some experience, and come back. And I think one of the things that just I was raised in that environment is that the customer is always right, and take care of your employees, and then happy employees meet happy customers. So one of the things I also took away from all of that experience is the core values and how important those are. So when I hired my intern, when I worked with graphic designer, I wanted people that were people that had caring hearts and that care about the customers and care about the mission of what we're about, which is creating tools and experiences to help leaders dominate their day. And that was real important to me. And the third part is just being fiscally responsible. And Southwest Airlines, we always did everything on a shoestring, and we figured out how to do things that were hard when we had to do them. And I learned that that was our biggest, most exciting times. When we come into a new market, we didn't have much money. We'd have to figure out how do we reach these people? How do we engage when the budget's really low? And so learning that it's really cash is king and how to manage that cash, and how to really focus on the customer. So those were the biggest takeaways I have from that experience.
Yeah, well, certainly, I think that's the right way to approach it. We
Yeah.
celebrated that with you guys too, I think at the summit, and as we've spent some time,
Yeah.
a lot of time, really, I mean, Gallup and Southwest is a great combo, but I think, you amplify those traits as we think about what you're doing now, through the journal, so that's great
Yeah.
as well. Couple questions coming out of the chat room. Let's get this kind of one out of the way. If folks want to, you mentioned this, overseas is difficult
Yeah.
to get right. So if folks who are purchasing from, let's just say the UK or Australia, anywhere around the world, what's the best way for them to kind of contact you? Because that's probably
Right.
something they don't want to go right off the website on. They probably want to
Yeah.
contact you
And
directly.
and
What's the best way?
several of them have text or DM me through Facebook, certified group. But the easiest way is just hello at the Strengths Journal. And I'll get right back with you, and we'll figure out. And I've got several people I'm working with now that have had specific needs, and we're working on solving each of those for them. So
We didn't plan this, and I probably should have, but any for listeners of today, are you offering any discounts, or is there a way for them to jump in and do some discounts today?
so thank you for asking. We actually, so now that this is going to run next this is going to run 3 or 4 weeks from now, right?
In a couple weeks. Yeah. Well, it's running
Yeah.
live today, and then it'll be the official version will be out here in 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah.
I would say the best thing for everybody to do is get on the site and sign up for the PDF and get into our email system. And then we'll give you alerts if we have a sale going on or special discount. That is the best way.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's, hold on, let me bring that page up again really quick. So we have, of course, we have the packages you were talking
Right.
about.
And then we have the
Customer,
journal, which is,
is this what you're meaning to sign up
yep.
right below the
5 ways.
packages?
Yep. Just sign up right there and you'll be right in our email group. And then you'll
Signed up
be
for that.
also signed up to get our weekly boost. So,
How do you, Jennifer asked a good question in this. How do you measure engagement within your team? So as we're thinking about the group that you're working with, even as coaches, or maybe even those you're coaching from a team standpoint, talk a little bit about, or maybe even how can you pair a planner with this idea of engagement? How can you measure, how is this working? How is the planner working? How are they engaging?
yeah. I think a lot of that is asking questions, right? So if I was working with somebody and I hope this is what you're asking about engagement, um, and they had a mission and they had a goal for their week, it's really easily just to ask questions of them of how did your week go? What were some of those questions you get in your weekly review? What were some things that kept you from reaching your goal this week? What were some things that blocked you? And then doing that 5 whys. Well, why do you think that happened? Why do you think it was, and you go through those 5 whys and you get down to the root cause and then you can start seeing and help and guide them through engagement. Because there's something blocking them,
Yeah.
something keeping them.
From an enterprise standpoint, from a product standpoint, of course, Gallup has a Q12 product
Yep.
we make available to organizations that they can engage with us on, and if they want to measure engagement at a company level, they can do that. If you're interested, if you want more information around that, I did a whole series on that with Mike McDonald, called, and not very creatively titled, but it's called Q12 for Coaches. And so if you go out to YouTube and just search Q12 for Coaches, put Gallup in there, you'll find that pretty easy. 14-part series on all the things that we talk about around engagement. I'd encourage folks, as we think about how that partners with the journal, each one, if you want to kind of work on your own engagement in
Yeah.
this, each one of those questions, there's 12 questions, and magically there's 12 months in a year. Focus on each one of those questions a month. So start the month with the question, do I
Mhm.
know what's expected of me at work? It's the very first
Mhm.
question. And what I'm doing, do I know what's expected of me? And really, throughout the day, throughout the week, let that be an overarching question of, in everything I'm doing this month, do I really know what's expected of me? Right? Month 2, do I have the correct materials and equipment to do my job in what I'm doing? Right? Have I given, and maybe the journal is part of materials and equipment. Like, have
Mhm.
I given myself the right materials and equipment to be able to do the role that I'm doing? And begin to reflect on those questions personally. I think that'd be a great way to
That's a
run
great
through the day.
idea.
And you can start that at any time, right? You don't have to wait for that
I
uh,
love that.
to get done. We are coming up on our time here. Maybe time for one more question, but before we do that, anything else I missed, Dana? Anything else you would add in?
No, I
Anything
think
to
I
add
think
here?
I had, like, some lessons learned. I think we talked about ask for help.
Yeah,
Make sure you ask for help. Take the risks. That's where you're gonna learn and grow. Be ready. And Jim, you and I were talking about this earlier. I did not know, when the opportunity was gonna come for me to step out on my own and do this, but I was ready when the pandemic hit and then they started offering, packages. I was like, "Oh my gosh, here's my window. I gotta jump." But if I had not been preparing the year before that and working on this, I wouldn't have been ready to launch when I did this fall. So I'm just saying, just be ready. And then I'd say create advocates. So I look at the people that bought the first week, and it was all of my people I've coached or people that I've been around, coworkers, fellow employees, and mentors and mentees and family members and just friends and people from all over my life. And I think those are going to be your big advocates when you start something like this. And then the last, and I think I can't say this enough, is be intentional.
mhm.
Um, you can change your life. You can dominate your day, but you got to do it daily. So that's That's my word.
That's good. And you know what? Some days it's good just to give in. You know,
Absolutely. Give yourself permission to do that. Yeah. Say today is not the day. We're
I
not going to
think
dominate the day today.
I think sometimes, in this planner productivity cycle that we feel like we've got to crush it every single day. And do you really crush it every day? I think there's just
No,
some days, right? We kind of go, oh, I can't do this anymore. I just need to take a break. Right?
absolutely.
Is that okay if I take a
Absolutely.
break in life? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I do it that way.
Yeah. We just got to measure what we're doing so we can manage it. And if we're not measuring it, we don't have a way to daily look at it. Back to your engagement question, it's just hard. So some days we're good, some days it's not. We're just human. We have to give ourselves that break.
Yeah, no, right on. Dana, thanks for taking the hour
Thank
and
you.
thanks for spending. I mean, this is way more than just an hour of work. Like
Sure.
you spent a ton of time getting ready for this moment. You've been
Thank
preparing
you.
your whole life, right, for this thing. And so an exciting moment in time for you. We're excited to partner with you as we launch it and launch it with you. Excited that it's another opportunity for some to be able to continue to learn and grow and move forward and and really kind of continue in their strengths journey in a way
Absolutely.
that works for them, right? Nate had said well, just before we go, Nate had said he'd like a little spot in the future on the binder to put the year or maybe a month in
Oh,
here,
that's a great idea. I love
right?
that, Nate. That's a
Kind of right
great idea.
like a Sharpie
Love
spot,
that. Yeah,
be able to
sure.
you could,
Yeah,
I think with a Sharpie, you could probably write that on there
yeah,
right now. This is really smooth, really
yeah,
smooth, so you could probably write that in there. But
yeah.
yeah, some good feedback. Well, we hope if you're listening today, we hope that it's been helpful and beneficial to you. Some great information, the Strengths Journal, if you want to head out.com. If you want to head out there and look at all the offerings that are there. Dana, hang out with me for one more second. With that, we'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available now in Gallup Access. And actually, all the webcasts now are in Gallup Access. So
That's
if you're
great.
kind of wondering, maybe if you're in the system, if you're thinking you no longer have to leave Gallup Access to get the webcasts, they're available in our resources section. But that's all found by going to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths, and they're available there. Now this will be a good use of my memory because my notes have just locked up and I can't get to the
Oh,
final section here. So we'll see how good I am. Okay. If you want to follow us, if you want to know all the webcasts that are going on here, of course you can follow us on Eventbrite, gallup.eventbrite.com. I update those weekly with new events that are coming up. If you're interested in coaching, master coaching, or becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach like Dana is, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. We'll have somebody call you back with some info on how to do that. We'd love to get you in that space. And yeah, you can purchase that from us as well. And so you can get that done there. If you want to join us this summer for the 2021 Gallup at Work Summit, that's all up and running now. And we'd love to have you join us for that. Gallup@work.com. Registration is open now. We'd love to have you join us. Part of a virtual. Yeah, we're virtual for one more year. Dana, I'm hoping next year. Don't you think we'll be in person?
it's going to be a hybrid year, is what I'm
Hmm.
saying.
Okay.
It's going to be a little bit of both.
I sure hope so.
Yeah,
Let's just think 2022 to be
yeah,
back in
yeah.
person. But we want to thank you for joining us today. If you found this useful, we'd love to have you share it and appreciate you guys coming out. If you're listening live, there won't be much of a post show. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.